So I'm excited. As I said, I usually am pretty excited. If you've been here, then you know I tend to get pretty excited about these events. But there is a term, creative collisions, and that's kind of how we met. Because your co-founder, the CEO of the company, Patrick Baines, reached out to me on LinkedIn, and we're going to talk about the power of social marketing. And he had been interviewed on Startup Grind in Philadelphia, where Nerdwise is based.
Yeah.
So first, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with us tonight. And I always like to kind of start off from the beginning and say, when you were growing up, were there folks that you saw around you that either were entrepreneurs or owned their own businesses? Did you kind of get that bug?
I did. Looking back at it now, it's easier to see, but none of us, again, have that crystal ball to be like, oh, I know exactly what it was like.
Sure.
But absolutely, I mean, my mother, my father, some friends and family along the way, they absolutely were serial entrepreneurs in their own rights. It might have not been in the digital or social marketing space because that probably actually didn't even exist.
Sure.
But I knew and had great mentors along an way. There's actually, if I had to pinpoint one person, it would be my mother and my father.
And even with Nerdwise, it's an interesting story because you and Patrick knew each other for a while, and maybe talk about that. Talk about how, because it was an interesting journey. You knew each other, and then you kind of both did life. And
yeah, I mean, I had a completely different background. I was in the dark when it came to digital or social marketing, or even just being an entrepreneur. Sure, again, I had great mentors and guidance, and I saw that along my life from a kid to a teenager. But I was in sports medicine. Patrick was very much business affiliated. He had his early days at LinkedIn. He started People Links and FreeSource, and we went our separate ways for maybe like 10 to 15 years. And we were really close friends. I mean, we were the same year at Alfred University in 2003. We were on the same level as far as like when we were in the dorms. We were both on the third floor. And we were just really good buddies. I mean, he would come out and support all the sporting events because I was big into football and athletics and athletic training. And Patrick was always like a big fan, a big cheerleader, and I was always a fan of everything that he was doing. But we never had this way to kind of cross-pollinate our worlds until maybe 5 to 6 years ago.
Right.
And again, we both had our successes separately, but there was always this kind of gut feeling, maybe he had it, I know I definitely did, that there'd be a way that we could link up.
At some
point. It just had to be the right time and just, again, the right moment. But I knew if there was somebody that I was going to dive deep into this world with, it didn't matter what it was, it was going to be somebody that I had a standing relationship with and somebody I could really trust. And he had been pitching me a couple different times to try to join his team. I just wasn't ready at those moments.
So we'll kind of fast forward to where you and Patrick reunited and decided that this was the time, this was the company. And so it was just the two of you. It's not where you are now, but you started off just the two of you, and we were talking earlier in a co-working space. Just kind of building. So talk about how that was for you two to come. You kind of both done your things for about 10 years when you came back together. So talk about the genesis of Nerdwise.
Yeah. So after about 10 years of being in sports medicine, I did try to branch out on my own to do some business, we'll say like business strategy or just business development, whatever you want to call it, on the West Coast. And it worked well for about 2 years, and then I was coming back. Patrick's like, you know what? I've left People Links. I've got this idea that we've been kind of talking about for the past couple years, and at that time it was called Game Time Updates. And I'm like, Patrick, like, I don't even know what this thing is. Like, I'm foreign to the world of digital and social marketing. Like, I'm not a big fan of Facebook. I know he loved LinkedIn, was like always gloating and boasting it up, and that stuff all seemed really fine and dandy. But I just was like, well, I don't really know. But if there was one time or one moment and one person that I was willing to take that chance on, it was during that transition back from California.
So let's talk a little bit about what actually maybe the evolution of what Game Time Update and how it became Nerdwise. What actually is the service that you guys are offering?
So
I thought that was important.
At that time, it was trying to help bars and restaurants spread the news, just like you would on a radio or in a newspaper, that maybe there were some upcoming games or there was a UFC event, and maybe they had some bar specials,
Right.
drinks or wings, whatever the case is. And Patrick had seen many, many years ago, he may have been in college still actually, so this is going back like 15 years or so, that in real time, the owners or the bar managers were telling people to come watch these games, but it's like the game's already started. You've got to create that ripple effect maybe a week before.
Sure.
And what he realized, maybe like his light bulb moment, was that there's a way for humans to do this better, or there's software that can maybe potentially automate this stuff.
Right.
So what can we do to make people successful but simplify the process at the same time?
Right.
Here we are today. I mean, we've got probably 500 partners across the globe. We've
Right.
got 10 plus full-time employees and 5 to 10 part-time contractors, which to me is pretty special when you think we were just two guys in an apartment 6 years ago, looking at a map on a wall trying to go door to door looking for like bar
Right.
owners.
Right.
And it's been a fun journey, I'll say that.
I guess we know that it's a product that works well for pretty much any kind of vertical.
Yeah.
It's definitely shown itself to be applicable in fitness. So what would be, if you could kind of walk through the process of a company that differentiates you? I think that's where I was trying to go. That's going to different what Nerdwise offers. That's different from another company that says, "Oh, we will help you with your social media."
One, I believe we really pride ourselves on customer service and just like transparent communication. We know that nobody's got this crystal ball to guarantee certain areas of success and be like, you give me $1,000, I'm going to give you $100,000 back. If they say that, like, be weary.
Right. Right. Absolutely right.
And we also know that by getting to know our clients and establishing like who's responsible for what, like whether it's content or email marketing or driving their paid advertising, that those are the pillars that are going to establish the success for them on the long haul. We know that many of our competitors, if we want to call them that, only really drive one pillar, which is paid advertising. Everyone wants to play in the sandbox of paid advertising. Like, that's great if you want to do that. To me, that's a pretty shaky or sandy foundation.
Is there a size of a company that's a really good fit for you? Because I'm thinking in terms of maybe a smaller company that can't afford to have their own marketing team or a content creator or something like that. Or it sounds as if it really, you're an extension of another company.
Yeah.
So it works whichever.
It does. I mean, you have to have certain resources. Like, I can't come and take pictures for you.
Sure.
And I can't just, we can build certain things from scratch, but it takes a lot longer to do. It does help if people have some of these assets already available, whether that's like maybe an email database or maybe hopefully at least a social media presence on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. Like, those things help. However, we also know that some of our best successes and our biggest learnings came from our most difficult clients who started with absolutely nothing.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you can make those two specific experiences successful, man, what can't you do?
Sky's the limit.
And I mean, those early on were very challenging clients, but today it's like, man, I love them for that.
Sure.
Because they pushed us to find ways to be creative and come up with unique solutions for them, whatever the case might be.
But I also know that you do training for like sales teams.
Yeah.
So that was something that is not, sales. Everybody needs sales. I mean, a company's not going to survive without sales. But talk about how that kind of deployment would work with a sales team.
So, everyone's looking for best practices, ways to improve their conversion, their retention, lifetime value. These equations are pretty well known. And what's important in those conversations, whether it's with a sales team or it's with a medical and dental practice or it's in the health and fitness space, is knowing like what it takes to create the success you're looking for. Because you got to start somewhere. And it could be like, well, how do you find new leads? How do you prospect them? How do you stay engaged? What are the best practices? Do you just call them once or email them once and you're like, man, I'm done with this? Sure, it is absolutely a science to that art, and there is it's a numbers game. You can't give up.
So let's talk about the company itself a little bit. You're here in New York. Patrick is in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And your team now, you've got about 15 or so team members.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Yeah. Well, we knew, Patrick and I, going back, say, 6 or so years ago, that we didn't want to be glued to a desk 9 to 5 every day. At least we wanted to have the option to choose like where we wanted to be when that was happening. So we wanted to build this culture and bake it into our DNA that we could find success wherever we were, and we knew that if we were going to be building this service-based industry that was off of technology,
Right.
then we should be able to do it anywhere. Because if I have access to Wi-Fi, a computer, and hopefully a phone at the very least,
Right.
you should be able to create success, especially if you got something that's powerful enough to create the, create and deliver the results they're looking for. I enjoy that I can work any time of day, on any night or morning or weekends. That to me is a privilege. And we found people that felt just like us too. And that was pretty exciting, because then it's almost like you had like this believers club that wanted to be a part of this solution and breaking away from the status quo or the mold that is so common. And we just kept finding awesome people all over the world. No one cares like how the sausage is made, which is like the product or the service. They just want it when it shows up to their door to be delicious. I mean, there's
Right.
plenty of times where I'm working at 3 a.m.
Sure.
But it's because maybe I couldn't sleep for whatever reason. I just, I woke up and it's like, well, if I can't go back to sleep, I can still plug into work and maybe start my day or get ahead of something.
Sure.
And to me, that was a big advantage. That to me is like worth its weight in gold.
Talk about, it's a different thing, obviously, from being an employee of a company to being pretty much a business owner. What is something that you love about it? Something that surprised you about? You're like, I didn't expect that. Good or bad?
Yeah, I love the options this business gives everybody. Because you get to, if you have kids, you get to maybe spend more time with your family or be
Right.
there to drop them off at school or pick them up, from practice. That's probably the biggest thing that I absolutely enjoy. What I guess maybe a little surprised is how big of a pain in the butt Patrick would be sometimes. You want to hear somebody beat a horse to death, Patrick will whisper loudly until something gets put into action. And it's all for the right intentions. I thought by being like good friends and close compadres that maybe sometimes it'd be a little bit smoother or easier. But looking back at it, those are the things that made us who we are today. I didn't expect, I'll just say that,
Right.
It'd be like, man, you were not gonna shut up about this one or two problems. Like you're really, even if I don't want it, like you're gonna keep putting it
Right.
into action until it actually does. And more times than not, it's the right thing. It
Right.
really is.
So it sounds like culture is especially with a remote team, building that culture, creating that culture
Yeah.
would be vital. And how did that? Was the culture building something that just evolved through trial and error, or did you guys kind of, when you two were together, saying, okay, this is kind of what we would like to see?
I believe that it naturally evolved because of the way Patrick and I are made up. Again, we're both completely separate people,
Sure.
But we both had very similar beliefs and wants and wishes in life. So that type of stuff that we were both looking for, which for me it was sometimes to be away from the city so I could be closer to my family and my friends. And to Patrick, sometimes he was like, I'm done with winter. Like I need to be away from this as often as possible.
Absolutely,
like please
right.
shut that door.
Absolutely.
And
right.
we would go out there to these open source platforms like Upwork and Mechanical Turk and try to find people who had similar mentalities as us, and then bring them on, try to understand what their goals are and maybe where they have experiences or where they lacked, or again, going back to it, it was like, do they have the right intangibles? Do they want similar stuff? And really, I think many people want what we are providing as far as like a business and an opportunity.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mentorship is something that you've talked about a lot, and there was a time when you were seeking mentors, and now you are in that position of really being, someone that is a mentor. I'm sure not just to your team, but just in general. So talk about that piece.
Yeah. Well, in this particular, 5 to 6 year time frame, I always wanted to get to a certain level where I could be respected and, be a voice of reason in a community, whether it's in Albany or New York or like New York City or Philadelphia, didn't care, I wanted to get to that. But I knew what was really important is that you have to listen before you talk. So I would just go into any meeting that Patrick would kind of be going into, and I would just sit there and watch, listen, observe, write notes, and figure out like, well, if this person's doing this really successfully, then like, why can't I?
Sure.
And if I have questions about it, I might not ask that individual because maybe I was embarrassed or too shy.
Right.
But I can ask Patrick, who is fearless, and be like, well, Patrick, like, can you explain this maybe a little bit better to me? Like,
Right.
these people in Philadelphia, I mean, there were some, whether you want to call them like titans or giants, I listened and learned from everybody. I mean, whether it was Rick Genzer or Kevin O'Neill, Peter Strid, David Lipson, these are all people who achieved some pretty high levels of success, and all I knew I needed to do was, one, attach myself to Patrick, and two, just listen to all of their successes and failures.
Sure.
And the problems that they're going through as well, because, you know,
Right.
there's always problems every day. You just got to figure out, like, do you want to get up and do you want to solve them? And these people enabled me to be like, wow, like, I want to be like these guys,
Sure.
or these girls, or this club. And it really kind of stemmed out of the co-working space that we were in, which was Benjamin's Desk at the time.
Right, which I've heard a lot about.
They gave us a platform that I'm forever thankful and grateful for. I mean, the whole Mayer family gave us the opportunity to be seen and also to learn from everybody that was way better than us, way smarter. Like, it's awesome to just listen to these brilliant minds and these geniuses. Be like, man, God, you are brilliant. I can't wait to like have enough money so we can hire you guys. You know? 'Cause they were just so bright in their own ways, in their own roles and responsibilities, and they had also gone through a lot of failures as well. And it's like, man, these guys have gone through it, and like, they're not mad. They just love the journey.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I learned as well too. It's like, man, they don't care about necessarily like this uber success. They just care about like going through this journey, because that's where the dream is. You know, it's not making $1 million. It's like, I got $1 million, that's great. It's like, no, like, who did you learn from? Who did you help? Who did you mentor? And like, just all of these other different aspects.
Right.
And it was a culture of inspiration in that whole area of Philadelphia. I mean, if you guys have never been to Philadelphia, like, please go. It is the epicenter of awesome.
Okay.
It really is. There's such a good synergy of startups and entrepreneurs and co-working space that those people absolutely let us stand on their shoulders and learn from them. There's no question.
So let's talk about the transition for you from going, you and Patrick working together, kind of peer to peer. Now you've got this remote team, and so that's pulling on your leadership in a different kind of way. So how has that been? I mean, in terms of hiring, definitely you're talking about relational, you know, that's really key. You're almost more concerned with how an individual fits in the team as opposed to the things that can be taught. But as a leader, was there, when it comes to the hiring, that process that you guys go through, whatever that process is, how did you come to that? And were there mistakes made?
Oh, absolutely. There's always mistakes. You just got to learn from them. For us, we had some really early lessons where maybe we were really hopeful in thinking that we found the right person or the right people, and maybe we just were a little bit too ambitious. And what we found out through, you know, trial and error and just, you know, natural progression is, if you want to just, if you want to see if somebody's worth bringing on full time, like, date them for a little while, just like you do in life before you marry, and, you know, test them a little bit, because let them step outside their comfort zone.
Right.
And those were some big lessons, because sometimes, again, we've had people come on that unfortunately maybe it didn't pan out, but it wasn't the people's fault. It was I point the finger at Patrick and myself because maybe we were a little bit too ambitious, or maybe we didn't have the right enablement material to champion the success that we were looking for.
Right.
So, I mean, those lessons were felt in a big way early on, because it's like you just get over ambitious. You're like, man, I know if we can find this one next person, like, it's going to be great.
Sure.
And you always want to have that wishful thinking, but at the same time, you've got to go through the due process and really figure out if it's a good match.
Right.
And that takes time, that takes experience. And now I can tell you that anybody that comes on, they come on part-time for a period of time, whatever that might be. It could be 6 months, it could be 2 months. But I'm not gonna jump in head first until we both get to feel each other out a little bit.
Test drive a little bit.
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered, and it's been about 5 years now, tough times, you know, lean times, I'm sure in the beginning as you were building, Has there ever been a time where you've just been like, you know what, had it, just done deal, we just wanted to throw the towel in?
I mean, I would say it would happen within the first 2 years, and it wasn't that anything that Patrick and I or anybody on the team at that time was doing wrong. If there was one thing that I would maybe hinge it on, it was my condition. Because during those first 2 to 3 years,
Right.
I unfortunately was in and out of hospitals on too far of a regular basis,
Right.
having way too many surgeries,
Sure.
way too many therapies.
Sure.
If there was a time the Titanic was going down, it was in the first 2 years.
Right.
However, I know that because Patrick kept it together, and I never surrendered. I will look anybody in the face and say, like, I didn't care if I was in a hospital or I was still sick at home. I was at work every single day. Like, there's no excuses. Everyone's got,
Yeah.
you know, everyone's got something going on.
Absolutely.
So, like, I would never want to point the finger back at myself and be like, I didn't give it my all. If I knew I had any ounce of energy or calorie in my body that could create some even minuscule, like, success, I was going to give it my all. And when we made it through that inferno,
Sure.
I knew there was no going back.
Yeah.
If we can handle 200 clients with 3 people and one of them's basically dead, what can't we do?
Sure.
And
Absolutely
being
right.
completely
Yeah,
honest.
sure.
And that to me just showed how strong mentally we were as a team. That there was this never surrender mentality, no matter what the situation. And you gotta, not everybody has that grit, but it's pretty important if you want to go through, you know,
Yeah.
the trenches of getting to where I guess currently we are today. Which, in all honesty, I feel like we're just getting started.
Right. It sounds like it
It's
with
wild.
the changes that
Yeah.
that are being made. Talk about. So I wanted to leave some time for folks to ask questions.
Sure.
So I want to say thank you first. I'm going to thank you again. But who might have a question for Coupe?
Are you asking if was I thinking about my family? when
How
we
do
were
you
going
how
through?
do you navigate?
Just how do you navigate your family dynamics? Are you married?
Yes, I am. Yep. Yeah. Well, I got a great wife, number one, who's understanding and has been patient as like anybody I know out there, because there's many loud whispers, we'll say, as to like what we were going through, whatever the case may be. But it was really about setting the stage of expectations and knowing that like if we want these certain things later on in life, flexibility to spend time with friends and family, then I'm gonna take this time to invest in as much as possible. Like, so if I can be that bridge for my family that makes it easier to walk over to the next opportunity, I'll be happy to work 70 hours a week to create that opportunity. And to me, that's more important than anything. I wanna make it easy for us in time, and everybody too. Like anyone that's on the team, like I want to de-risk the things that are happening inside of our services, and I wanna make it a fluid and efficient process so that they don't have to always reinvent the wheel. Nobody should. And when we can do that, and we do that well, everybody can hopefully enjoy whatever they want, you know? I hope that answers your question. So the way that the question is, how do we build trust with our partners early on, and you know, what are maybe some of the systems that we use to develop that trust? And probably the first thing that we did really well is we documented everything. Google was our best friend. Google Sheets, Google Docs, you name it, that was our first CRM. That was the first way we created our systems and developed on those processes along the ways. We documented everything. The second thing that we probably did is that when we evolved those systems, we were able to put it into a certain presentation or into a box that they started to notice, like, this is pretty polished, this is really well thought out, and this didn't just happen overnight. When you can show people what the outcome will be and guide them through that process, they're like, wow, like this really has some layers to it and some steps to this onboarding and this setup between you and I. They didn't just say, hey, like this is turnkey, you just give us money and like we're gonna just tell you to set it and forget it. There was a lot of question asking, there was a lot of documentation, and when we went through the whole setup process, there was a lot of like becoming familiar with the business owners, because 80% of it is gonna be about the business conversation, but the other 20% is like, do you wanna work with these people? Like, do you enjoy collaborating and, you know, getting the medicine sometimes that you don't wanna receive? And are you transparent and candid about that, whatever that conversation is supposed to be about? So I believe people really trusted us because we didn't sell them lies. We didn't give them false guarantees and say, hey, remember that stuff that we were doing last month? Yeah, forget about it. It doesn't work this month. We got the next thing. We were very transparent in saying that nobody in this room or in this world can see the future, but we're going to give you the best practices and take what we've learned and developed with our first maybe 10, 20, or 30 clients, and now it's evolved into this really unique process that is a beautiful system, and showing you like this is the way to getting to where you want to be. And documenting everything from the very get-go, from sales scripts to the way we onboarded to the questions we asked, having that information to then reference back and look at helped us to improve our day-to-day and our future processes. If we just kept guessing and pulling these things out of the ether or out of the universe, man, it's just like a crap show. It's the wild, wild west. But the fact that we took all of those wisdom nuggets and put them into paper or to digital papers or digital entities and like improved upon them, slow and steadily over time, people started to understand like we were serious. Like we were trying to build something, even if it was our first 1 or 2 years. And the people who were with us for those first 2 years, they saw us evolve. They're like, well, how are you guys doing it? So like, because we're trying to create a process that we're following. And if it's working, like, that's great. How can we find a ways to make it better? And if it's not, like, how do we eliminate it or just like make it better? Like whatever the case may be. So it was all about documenting the whole process. Absolutely. Did I answer your question? Cool.